I have three readings this morning. The first is from the book of Deuteronomy, chapter 7. And this is sort of a famous or infamous verse, probably, I think, a lot of people's least favorite paragraph from the Hebrew Scriptures. But I include it because I'm going to be talking about the inner wolf. And that means it's important to look at our own traditions. When the Lord your God brings you into the land which you are entering to take possession of it, and clears away many nations before you, the Hittites, the Girgashites, the Amorites, the Canaanites, the Perizzites, the Hivites, and the Jebusites, 7 nations greater and mightier than yourselves, and when the Lord your God gives them over to you and you defeat them, then you must utterly destroy them. You shall make no covenant with them, show no mercy to them. You shall not make marriages with them, giving your daughters to their sons, or taking their daughters for your sons. For they would turn you away from following me to serve other gods. Then the anger of the Lord would be kindled against you and would destroy you quickly. But thus shall you deal with them. You shall break down their altars and dash in pieces their pillars and hew down their asherim and burn down their graven images with fire. It's not my most favorite biblical reading. It's actually become a little bit famous recently in some of the theist debates. From the novel Steppenwolf by Hermann Hesse. There once was a man, Harry, called the Steppenwolf. He went on 2 legs, wore clothes, and was a human being, but nevertheless he was in reality a wolf of the steppes. He had learned a good deal of all that people of a good intelligence can, and he was a fairly clever fellow. What he had not learned, however, was this: to find contentment in himself and his own life. Now he finds in himself a human being, that is to say, a world of thought and feelings, of culture, and a tamed nature. But besides this, he finds within himself a wolf. That is to say, a dark world of instinct, of savagery, of cruelty, of raw nature. From Hermann Hesse. And a more positive third reading from the Native American tradition. One evening, an elderly Cherokee brave told his grandson about a battle that goes on inside people. He said, "My son, the battle is between 2 wolves inside us all. One is evil. It is anger, envy, jealousy, sorrow, regret, greed, arrogance, self-pity, guilt, resentment, inferiority, lies, false pride, superiority, and ego. The other wolf is good. It is joy, peace, love, hope, serenity, humility, kindness, benevolence, empathy, generosity, truth, compassion, and faith." The grandson thought about it for a minute and then asked his grandfather, "Which wolf wins?" The old Cherokee simply replied, "The one that you feed." The emotions we feed and practice in our lives become defining of us. One thing we can do to feed that good wolf is to practice meditation or other spiritual practices. And so we pause now for a brief moment. Meditation to be followed by hymn number 123, Spirit of Life. Just take a couple deep breaths, relax. Forget the concerns that brought you here, the concerns weighing on your mind. Take a little inner time to center yourself. Take a moment to know what you're feeling. Take a moment to connect to the senses, to connect to your breathing. Be in the moment of breathing. Pause. And you can do a 4-check review. What is your body feeling? What is your mind thinking? What is your heart feeling? What is your soul experiencing? Well, thank you very much for this opportunity to address you. Started out from Reisterstown this morning. It's about 2.5 hours, so listened to a lot of Mozart, and glad it wasn't snowing or freezing rain like tomorrow. I wanted to start with a story from the Talmud, which is a collection of Jewish works that's considered edifying, but not quite fully inspired. I've added a lot of detail to the story, to this Talmudic tale. And I like the stories in the Talmud because a lot of times they touch on the goodness of the human heart and ethical action. And so one of these stories describes the effects of envy and hatred and greed on the human heart. The story is set in ancient Babylon, where the Israelites had been forced into exile. They were forced to march hundreds and hundreds of miles from Israel all the way over to Mesopotamia in 587 BCE, the exile. Now, as the years went by, they were there about 70 years, the Jews of Babylon became very successful in helping to administer the empire. In fact, many remained in Babylon for over 1,000 years until the Islamic conquests in about the year 700 of our era. So this tale tells of 2 Jewish merchants in precious metals, jewels and gems and crystals. They operated competing operations in the capital city of Babylon, across the street from one another. They hated each other bitterly, spared no expense to hurt the other's business and reputation. In his gardens one night, one of the merchants of gold was praying, but his heart was full of hate, not just openness to the infinite. An otherworldly being magically appeared and granted the merchant one wish. The merchant thought to himself, is this an angel, a jinn, or a demon? He was not sure. However, there was a condition to his wish. His hated competitor would get twice of whatever he wished for. Perhaps this is a demon come to taunt me by granting more to my competitor. He rolled this over in his mind. The merchant thought for many months on his wish, weighing all the possibilities in his mind as he weighed gold in his balances. He thought of asking for wisdom, for power, success, love, measuring each in the warped scales of his mind. If he wished for an endless mine that produced the purest gold, his competitor would receive 2 such mines. If he wished for control, absolute power over the entire empire, well, his enemy would receive an empire double the size. This made his choice impossible. One day he awoke with a shout that reverberated through the marble passageways of his palace. He was already wealthy. The stone still cool in the early morning light. He had conceived of a wish of great cunning and shrewdness. That night the otherworldly being appeared, seeming to know that a wish had been wished. In the garden, as before, he miraculously appears. The merchant checks one more with this mystic being. Whatever I receive, my competitor will receive the double. The angel said that was so. Whatever he received, twice as much would go to his competitor. In that case, the merchant said, I wish to be blind in one eye. The next morning, he woke up. He could see, but he checked. He was unable to see out of his right eye. But in another palace, nearby, his competitor awoke, completely and utterly blind. Now that his competitor was blind in both eyes, he could not see the jewels to judge their worth. His skills and knowledge were worthless. The merchant who could still see out of one eye cornered the market. His envy of his neighbor brought him to a terrible place. This is a Jewish tale, but other traditions know this dynamic of the human heart. The Greeks say the gods grant all wishes to those whom they wish to destroy. This story is an example of that. A gift from an angel, and the merchant chose to be blind. James Baldwin writes, it is a terrible and inexorable law that one cannot deny the humanity of another without diminishing one's own. There are people filled with hate, a long-term smoldering resentment, and all of us have moments of wildness. In the novel Steppenwolf, Hermann Hesse describes the anguish of a man who cannot love. There is an inner wolf in him. It is part of his human nature. We all share this human nature. It's a part of who we are. In the reading from the Hebrew Scriptures that I read this morning, we saw that hatred is not absent from our own religious traditions. It's hard to see in our own tradition tales of the wolf inside. I remember that passage was used, as I said, in a debate between atheist and theist, and the theist could not just condemn that passage because everything in the Bible had to have a reason and was good. I once read a book on Buddhist meditation written by a doctor. I tried to find it in my library, but I couldn't. But I remember what he said. He said that for the past 20 years, I've sat in meditation 15 hours a week. I'd like to pretend, as a minister, I do that. But it's more like 15 minutes. 15 hours per week. He's a doctor. He's a busy person. He said he became more acquainted with himself, his patterns of thought, his rushes of emotions, his wants and desires. He was a psychiatrist, and he felt knowing himself could help him help others know themselves. He described his inner world, the good, the bad, and the ugly. He even described his own inner Hitler. And this was very ironic to me because he was Jewish. And it shows that there are strands of these powerful negative emotions in all of us. Our own little inner Hitler, our own inner Steppenwolf. In everyday terms, everyday life, this could be our judging side of others, our critical side. Do any of you ever criticize anyone and then feel a little like you shouldn't have done that? Our accusing aspect of our personality. Well, are you totally cheered up this Sunday morning? Here's some good news. From the Native American tradition, we hear that, yes, we have a wolf, an inner Hitler, a Steppenwolf, but we also have a tamed wolf, another side, a wolf we can walk with. And the secret is not to feed the wild wolf, not to feed our addictions, our angers, our resentments, our self-defeating thinking. Positively, we can practice many forms of life-affirming meditation, counseling, physical exercise, reading of insightful books, deep talking with family and friends. And I think religion is not just about ideas, doctrines, dogmas, beliefs. but about how we practice life, how we practice spirituality. Practice is a very important word. Religion is not saying yes or no to a belief. It's not just about that. It's about feeling and emotions and practicing them. And modern science is finally giving us the brain science that shows this. As we practice different ways of feeling, acting, and behaving, we are said to build the neural pathways in our brains. And we're able to access them and fire them better when we need to. The more they are used, the faster, larger, stronger they grow. That's what we're told. So if we practice peace, peacefulness, if we practice a spirit of forgiveness, restraint, good judgment, when the time comes, we'll have the circuits there. I like that idea of circuits growing stronger. So feed the right wolf. Practice. Develop new emotions. Have a dream to live for. The story of the angel visiting the merchant of gold is not so far-fetched. It really is a story about us. The wish that the angel grants is a metaphor for life on earth. For we are given this one wish, this one life, with which we can make something grand, or which we can engage in a hyper-competitive struggle that knows no limits. We can take this chance given to us, but it is up to us what we make of it. We really are given this freedom, the gift we are given, and our lives are expressions of what we have wished for. The inner wolf is also tied to a pack loyalty. Racism has been part of human history. Racism, however, is not only an animal impulse. Society's norms can sometimes support a racist system as apartheid or segregation. Bruce Hornsby, a rock and roll singer, puts into words the dynamic of this economic racism. Hey, little boy, you can't go where the others go because you don't look like they do. Hey, old man, how can you stand to think that way? And did you really think about it before you made the rules? And I thought we heard some Bruce Hornsby for the prelude. Although not perfect, Unitarians and Universalists have been leaders in race relations, as have many members of Christian denominations. Theodore Parker, a Unitarian minister, led an unsuccessful raid to free a captured slave in Boston. He hid slaves on the way to Canada in his parsonage and slept with a pistol by his side. He said he would die defending their rights. We can see this inner wolf in history. During the 80s, there were over 26 Bible colleges that would not admit black students. Up till 1960, some denominations did not ordain ministers of African descent. And throughout American history, many black churches have had to found new denominations because white denominations would not accept them. There's a history of racism in UU churches as well. And things change. What an honor to read Martin Luther King's words this morning in worship. I think part of the problem with religion is that we try to develop an absolute religion, and sometimes this focus on belief. There's this human impulse that wants to know. And when you get that absolute kind of belief, you tend to be exclusive about it. The focus is on the letter of the law, not the spirit. Samaritans and Jews were from two separate packs of wolves, you could say, Samaritans and Jews. The Good Samaritan looked beyond his pack. That's interesting. Jesus, the Jew, is saying, look at the Good Samaritan. Not the good Jew, the Good Samaritan. The Samaritan helped a Jew who had been robbed, even though as a rule they didn't get along. The Good Samaritan conquered his inner wolf. And we can look back at history. I teach humanities. And so I do go back and look at the history. You can look at the world history through Chinese and black thinkers. I would estimate, it's just a very rough guess, that perhaps 20% of the British Empire was financed by slave trade, slave labor, and the opium trade. We have to realize, I think, that at many points how warped some of our history has been. Even Thomas Jefferson, our great Unitarian hero, had slaves. Several historians now forcefully argue that Thomas Jefferson sold one of his own children into slavery, a child he had by a slave mistress. Racism is not only about hatred and its cultural manifestations, it's about financial and political power. The wealth of the British and the Spanish empires was supported by a murderous slave system. And we can measure its evil by the sanctity of England's counterpart Gandhi, one of the last century's greatest spiritual leaders. Europe, you could say, was all prim and proper on the outside, while deep inside lurked a dark-eyed wolf roaming the steppes, the heart of darkness. Where were Christians in all of this? Well, many were on the front lines against racism. Many were lost. England didn't start burning freethinkers until 1650. The church I served as a student minister was founded 8 years earlier in 1642. Liberal Christians, theists, and humanists can recognize Jesus taught a universal love of neighbor in the parable of the Good Samaritan. We can find ethical insight in the Christian tradition and in many other traditions. When that angel calls to us and offers us that one wish in life, and all life is that wish, when the Spirit of life calls to us, let us not wish for blindness in one eye. When the wolves of society prey on the innocent, I call us to defend them from injustice, as did Gandhi, Theodore Parker, and Martin Luther King. Beware that inner Hitler, the untamed wolf, the wolf always accusing others. There is a better way, which we learn with practice. We make strides. We can improve the quality of our love, our willingness to go the way. We are all bound together by a common human nature. Be the Good Samaritan. If we truly love ourselves, we love the all. Blessings.